another Star Mini Gaming YouTube video, and it's time for another narrative review video. It's been a little while since I put one of these out. Honestly, with the move and all, I got a little bit behind on it, but here we go. Jumping right into the next one from a chronological perspective, from the Gates of Azir. I've gone, kind of out of order. I said in one of my other videos that there wasn't really anything on the Black Library website that said, here's the timeline in order. So I ended up jumping around a bit. So I'm going back and kind of filling in the gaps that I inadvertently created in doing the videos in the order that I did. But I'm going to go ahead and make a YouTube playlist. So if you're just kind of coming along, if you click on the playlist, you'll get them all in the correct order there. Once they're all done. I still have a few more that I think 2 or 3 more after this that I have to do before I kind of catch up. But with that being said, let's dive on in. So this one is Bourne by the Storm, and it's a continuation of the story of Vandus and Ionis, Cryptborn. And so this is the second story in terms of the Realm Gate Wars. We first have Gates of Azir, then we have this, almost immediately after. And right at the very beginning, we see Vandus and Ionis split up and go their separate ways. Vandus, at the end of the first one, the Gates of Azir, had a vision of Korghos Kul's Pyramid of Skulls. And Korghos wanted to take Vandus' skull as an immortal and as someone who had escaped him before, which I'll go into in a bit more detail in a little bit, and to crown that pyramid in Korghos' Kul's desire to ascend to daemonhood for Khorne. Also, we find out in this story that there is a realm gate directly to Khorne's realm at the top of this pyramid as well. So Vandus decides, excuse me, that he's going to deviate from the exact mission parameters that Sigmar himself gave him to go after this, and he kind of reasons that the vision had to have come from Sigmar himself, so he's kind of okay with it. Vandus, I mean. Ionis takes part of the warrior chamber and continues on to the mission that they were specifically assigned before they even came to the realm of fire to kind of carry out once they had captured that initial point and established a beachhead. And so Ionis continues on to take down one of the strongholds of Korghos Kul. And as Vandus continues kind of going after Kul, he comes across this big valley where all of a sudden this fog kind of rolls in, and his stormcasts see the spirits of loved ones and friends from their prior lives. So it's kind of throwing them in disarray, and Vandus sees his wife and his 2 sons hiding behind her, and then as the spirit gets closer, it kind of twists and misforms, and it turns out that, it's of course a trick of chaos, and all these Khorne forces just, bull rush the Stormcasts and throw them in a disarray, and it's a really big battle that ensues, and Vandus is trying to rally his forces. It's not really working because they've just been so scattered and so, just caught unprepared by this ambush. And it's just, they're really pressed as hard as they, possibly can be without being completely annihilated. And we see at one point that Vandus is able to reform a small group of liberators around him and kind of form a, kind of a defensive hard point amidst basically this sea of Khorne's forces. They're just moving in and attacking. And we have another encounter of Vandus fighting a Korgorath. In each of the early stories, we've seen, the Korgorath kind of appear here and there, and we've seen that, they're pretty powerful. Like, if the Stormcast don't work in concert together, that, they'll kill more than a few of the regular troops, or maybe even like a prime or two, which is the equivalent of a sergeant. But for Vandus and his Dracoth, this honestly is not a problem. The Korgorath kills a few Liberators. Vandus, his Dracoth, basically steps forward, spits lightning, and annihilates this thing, much like it can do if you're lucky in game. And then Vandus realized that the basically this distraction of attacking this Korgorath has led him to separate once again from even the small kind of defensive hardpoint that he has established, and he falls under attack by bloodletters that have been summoned. Basically, while this is going on, the Khorne forces are performing rituals to summon bloodletters and the like from Khorne's realm. But fortunately, he's kind of like praying to Sigmar, and all of a sudden a bunch of Liberators and Retributors and Judicators and all just to come flooding to Vandus and reform. It's not all of them, but it's a very large number. And, they kind of beat them back, and Vandus is like, how did y'all find me in the midst of the battle? And one of his primes is like, you were like a beacon of light, and he looks down and he sees that his armor was like glowing. Basically, like, he was being empowered by Sigmar without even really realizing it in the fight, so that, he could fight better, he could take more punishment, and that, empowerment by Sigmar caused him to literally glow with Sigmar's power and become a bit of a beacon. So, we see that begin to turn the battle in their favor, and then the prosecutors return from their kind of scouting and sweep down from the sky and attack and just crush the Khorne forces, and they just annihilate them all. One thing that's kind of interesting is, if you haven't read the novels, you may not be aware of it. If you play the game, the prosecutors have the ability to throw their hammers, and you might kind of wonder, how exactly that works, because they're only holding two. And my first thought was, are they kind of like Thor in the Marvel universe, where he's able to throw Mjolnir and call it back to himself? But they're not. Basically, for the prosecutors, what they do is that all the Stormcast are imbued with some of Sigmar's power, and that's like how they're able to basically like come to the battlefield via lightning and stuff. Like, so the prosecutors literally, like, with their gauntlets will like summon up energy, and then it will basically take the form of hammers. And so whenever they like throw their hammers, it reverts to energy as it flies, but it still maintains that shape, and then it strikes their enemy. So they literally have a limitless supply of hammers, which we haven't really seen like any instance where they're fighting someone and maybe lose a hammer or something, and like summon a new one. But it's in my opinion a pretty neat ability, because that does exist within the narrative to where they could do that if GW ever decides to focus one of their stories pretty strongly around like a Liberator Prime, and if he was ever locked in a pretty epic combat, then I would look for that there. But anyways, they wipe them out, and before I continue any further, I want to kind of take a step back and talk about Vandus. Before he was Vandus, he lived in the Realm of Fire, and he was a tribe leader, because, the Realm of Fire was lots of small human tribes whenever Chaos was attacking it. It had basically become that. And Vandus' name was Vendel Blackfist, and he was, the leader of a small tribe. And basically, Korgoth was, moving through, wiping out all of these tribes of people in this area of the world. And he got to Vandus' tribe, and Vandus basically took up this big hammer that, was for like forging stuff, and was going to face him in combat rather than flee, sell his life to try to buy his people some more time. And whenever they were going to fight, Vandal, who later became Vandus, prays to Sigmar not for salvation, but he prays that Sigmar would give him the strength to avenge those who had fallen to Korgoth's Kul. And so whenever Kul charges in to attack him, Sigmar literally like struck Vandal down with lightning and summoned him into the realm of Azir to be formed into a Stormcast. And that kind of is a big part of the reason that Vandus and Korgoth Kul have this kind of rivalry. Not only it extends beyond even Vandus' time as a Stormcast, because Kul hates him because Vandus is the one who got away. Nobody else had ever escaped him when he basically went to fight them. And so Kul has, an extra vendetta against him. And because of the events in the Gates of Azir, Kul at this point in the story is disgraced in the eyes of his fellow Khorne followers. And he basically has to reclaim his position, prove that he deserves it. So at one point he's attacked by several of the greater lords that were underneath him. I think it's 4 or 5 at once, and he has no weapon and they're all armed, and he kills them all pretty easily. Doesn't really even suffer much of a scratch. He takes one cut, but he just kind of goes with it, uses it to his advantage. He then returns to where his throne is and sees a bunch of his people basically like feasting on the fallen of their own ranks as opposed to like going out and killing the enemy. And he's so enraged by this that he basically wipes out an entire camp of his own troops and reestablishes himself as, top dog, but he hasn't really lost a step. And so, we see Kul rise again to power, and meanwhile Ionis goes and carries out his mission and is successful. They encounter some hardship and there's some casualties, and there's a little bit of a side exploit that Ionis is unwillingly forced upon for a brief moment that I'm not going to touch on in this video, because I really want to do an entire video on Ionis Bourne because I think that he's such a compelling character within the narrative. So I'll talk more about that in that video, but I'm not going to talk about it here. But anyways, Vandus, after leading his troops to victory in this ambush, finds another group of Stormcasts led by a different Lord Celestant, Jaktos, who is a bit overly headstrong and throws caution to the wind a bit too much. Finds them over the next ridge, being attacked by a bunch of Khorne forces, and while they're, attacking this first Khorne force, Jaktos' troops are, and they look like they're about to win. Another Khorne force is coming up to ambush them from behind, and it looks like Jaktos and his troops are going to be wiped out, but then, of course, Vandus and his Stormcast kind of come in and save the day. And so he and Jaktos have a discussion, and Jaktos says, I feel ashamed of my failure, and I want to help you destroy Kul, and I want to do this to redeem myself. And so Vandus is like, okay, let's do this. And so they join forces, and basically they go to Kul's throne, and they split off into 2 different groups, and they launch their attacks. And Jaktos is like determined to beat Vandus to Kul and to kill Kul and kind of reclaim his honor, right? And he is successful in getting to Kul first. He presses his troops in hard and fast, and they're cut all the way to Kul, who is basically waiting at his throne at the center of this battlefield with the realm gate there, and on top of this massive, basically pyramid of skulls. And Kul engages Jaktos, and Jaktos is, unlike Vandus, he's not a mounted Lord Celestant. He is exactly as the foot model is described. He has the same armament, the smaller warhammer, and the special relic blade. And he engages Kul in this duel, and it's a very, very epic duel. Like, the battle between Korgoth Kul and Vandus in the Gates of Azir has nothing on this duel. This is a true duel of, master combatants. It's like basically, you take the greatest duel from any kind of like sci-fi or fantasy movie, and this is at least that. This is like, obviously it's over choreographed, but this is like the Anakin versus Obi-Wan duel in Episode 3. It's like this is the culmination of this entire story thus far, like unexpectedly so. But this is just the most epic one-on-one combat that we've had thus far in the Age of Sigmar from a chronological perspective. And Jacktos is a master duelist beyond even Vandus's capabilities. Excuse me. In a fight, maybe Vandus wins, especially on his Dracoth, maybe not. But in terms of like raw skill and speed and all, Jacktos is perhaps unmatched. And basically he defeats Cool and then gets cocky and doesn't go for the easy killing blow. And that ends up costing him. The duel goes on a little bit more. Korgoth Cool is able to get an opening and basically tells him, or like lops off one of his arms, and is basically like, "You idiot, you should have killed me when you had the chance. How did you really think you could defeat me?" And then takes his big old axe that we see on the model and kills Jacktos with it. And one of the other Stormcasts is nearby, the Lord Castellant, which is the foot one with the halberd and the lamp and the little bird dog, for Jacktos's Stormcasts. And he sees this happen. And he literally sees Korgoth Cool's axe rip the soul out of Jacktos and banish it into the realm of Khorne. And this Lord Castellan is like, Jacktos is dead. Like, normally when Stormcasts die, their spirit returns to Azir, to the Heaven Realm, and they are reforged and they come back. But Jacktos is gone. There is no returning for him. Like, he is truly dead. And Vandus sees this and, flies into rage and cuts his way to Korgoth, and Cool and him have another fight. And unlike the first one, when Vandus is victorious, he's losing. And he basically gets beaten down, and Cool is bringing up his axe, ready to finally finish his longtime enemy that he's been that he's been bothered by for centuries, that this one foe escaped. And now that he's returned in a twisted sort of way, Cool is ecstatic. He's like, I finally get to kill this guy that I've hated for so long. This like one thing that has been a thorn in my otherwise perfect career. And just as he's about to strike him down, Vandus just cries out this Sigmar, and he's like, Sigmar, I need your help. And a bolt of lightning beyond anything that's ever like brought the Stormcast down into a world strikes, and it just basically explodes the entire pyramid. Stormcasts and Bloodbound are just thrown everywhere. Cool is knocked flying. The Realm Gate is just obliterated, and Vandus and his Dracoth are gone. And Ionis Cryptborn is some distance away watching this, because he and his Stormcast have managed to arrive during the battle and reinforce Vandus and the other Stormcast, so that in terms of just a fair fight, even excluding like the kind of contest of champions going on in the middle, the Stormcast have a good chance of winning this, just straight out. And Vandus sees this, and this is all told from his perspective at this point. And he kind of talks about how like this has basically been a crippling blow struck to Cool and the forces of Khorne that inhabit this part of the world, and that while the war is not over, that it's well on its way to being won in this region of the Realm of Fire. One thing that we learn kind of as we go on into the other books is that, and it makes sense, is that these realms are very, very large. We don't know really if they're like a planet, like how this all really works yet. It's not fully like defined, but these realms are large enough to have basically multiple countries and nations that were within them before Chaos came and claimed everything, and that once Chaos has it's kind of been, each of these realms have been broken down into various sections that have been ruled by different chaos warlords that have kind of risen to power over a certain segment. And so that, with this victory, Cool's forces have been effectively neutered. Cool will probably never be able to regain this level of strength of an army again. That all of his hard work to ascend to the blessings of Khorne and to ascend beyond his mortal flesh are now destroyed. All of this work is done. His career has been just knocked flat. Unfortunately, he's not dead yet, so we don't know if GW is going to kind of return to that story. In the next story that Vandus and Ionis are in, Vandus asks about Cool, and Ionis basically tells him that other Stormcasts have been dispatched to continue the war against them because they end up being needed elsewhere in the story. But so we may not have seen the last of Cool. I kind of hope we have, just not because he's a boring character, like he's for a Khorne warlord compared to the other Chaos characters that we've met in the other books. I'd say he's the most interesting Chaos, commander, save one other one. And we'll talk about that other one pretty soon. Maybe the next story, I'm not quite sure. I'll have to go back and look. But as far as the Khorne forces go, he's been the most interesting commander. So I don't, kind of wish they'd end him for that purpose. But just to have him defeated twice already, it's kind of taking away some of the, I guess like the awe of the character. Whenever we're initially introduced to Cool in the Gates of Azir, and even to a degree in this, like, Cool is a badass. Like, Cool has killed and conquered fellow Khorne warlords. He's basically amassed the largest Khorne force in this entire realm. He owns the most territory. He's the biggest and the baddest. And he's been humbled twice. So it's like, while he may not be completely gone, kind of looking at this character as being super powerful is really going to be more difficult as time goes on if he continues to lose so much. So we'll see where GW goes with this, but that's where we're going to draw this story to an end. I'm going to try to, like I said in another video, make these a bit more regular on their dates. I'm aiming for Thursday through Friday to be when these narrative reviews go out. So expect the next one about next Thursday, Friday. Until next time, this is James, and happy gaming.